Okay guys, today's video is focusing on Sheila, the character of Sheila in Inspector Calls, and in particular how her character evolves from the start of the play through to its conclusion, and what message does the character of Sheila carry? What intention did Priestley have behind Sheila's evolution from naive, young, innocent, protected girl to perceptive, mature, determined, confident young woman? Okay, so first of all, who is she? Well, she's the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Burling and has just become engaged to Gerald Croft. Don't be afraid to state the obvious when answering any question on Sheila, or anybody for that matter. Priestley uses Sheila as a symbol of the younger generation and hope for the future, that they can challenge their parents' self-centered capitalist views while simultaneously promoting a more caring, just society for all. Okay, so Sheila's young. She undergoes the kind of most dramatic transformation, you'd have to say, from the start of the play. And Priestley deliberately has this in contrast to how Sheila's parents respond to the incidents with Eva Smith and Daisy Renton. They don't change at all. So they're stuck in their ways. Whereas Sheila, the part of the younger generation, she does change. She acknowledges her role in the death of Eva Smith. She challenges her parents' views on capitalism and workers' rights, and she understands that perhaps the way they treat people and their attitudes aren't helpful for a fairer society. She takes this on, and as a consequence, Priestley uses her as a beacon of hope for the future. You could also state that she represents new ideas surrounding gender equality, challenging the outdated views of her father, mother, and Gerald. Okay, remember, we're talking about 100 years ago, and the place of women in society, it was very different to it is now. Women didn't have a voice. Their roles were very much domesticated, and her life was mapped out for her. The play opens with her as a celebration of her engagement to Gerald. And one thing that struck me was when she says to Gerald about the ring, was this the one you wanted me to have? Where's her independence? Where's her voice in this? Look at her father's attitude towards the wedding. I think he's not really that bothered about whether she's happy to be marrying Gerald. He sees it more as a business opportunity. But anyway, these are areas in relation to Sheila and who she is. Okay, so to help you analyse the character of Sheila, I've broken her character development into 3 sections. So how we're introduced to her in the opening scenes, then how she responds to the inspector, and then how is she after the inspector has departed. Okay, so in the opening scenes, although quite playful in her delight at receiving her engagement ring, she does question Gerald's actions the previous summer when he was away from her for quite a long time. This hints that she's not as naive as she may first appear. Now, you cannot answer any question on an Inspector Calls without referencing the stage directions. Okay? If it's on character, we have to understand how Priestley introduced the character to us at the start, and that's to be found in the stage directions before the play, the dialogue starts. Okay, so it's a technique. It's understanding Priestley's intentions. You simply must reference them. Okay, so how is she presented in the opening stage directions? Well, she's very pleased with life and rather excited. Let's see, what have I written about that? Okay, so she's very pleased with life. She appears self-satisfied, rather excited, maybe giving the impression of a childlike innocence. And this is substantiated in the opening scenes, where she doesn't really have a lot to say. She doesn't challenge her parents. She calls her parents mummy and daddy, which is quite childlike, reinforcing that impression that she's rather excited and easily excited, maybe materialistic as well, lacking depth. She also says then, I remember I referenced just a few minutes ago, is it the one you wanted me to have, to Gerald about the engagement ring? What does this say? Hints at a materialistic attitude, but also reflects the submissive and passive nature of women in that era. Remember, as much as Eva Smith is representative of all lower class women, maybe Sheila is representative of middle and upper class women as well, and women maybe more so in general. Okay, It is important for Priestley to introduce Sheila as this shallow, submissive character, as it makes her transformation more impressive and dramatic, i.e., if she can change, then so can anyone. This is intended to have a big impact on the audience watching, post World War II audience, where society was fed up with inequality, fed up with the consequences of a second World War in 30 years, and it was ripe for change. It was ready to embrace a new way forward. Seen very much with the context of, although Churchill and the Tories were in power for the victory in World War II, within a year Labour had won a landslide general election. So the appetite was for change, and Sheila represents this. Okay, her evolution, her character development, how it continues now. The inspector's arrival. So, by contrast to her father, she's quick to feel guilt and express remorse and shame at the way she has treated Eva Smith. This follows on from her challenge to her father that girls like Eva aren't just cheap labour, they're people. So, from mummy and daddy, she's now starting to challenge her father, her parents' attitudes. She aligns herself with the inspector. She doesn't try and excuse what she's done, the way she's treated Eva Smith. Remember, she got her sacked from the Millward's clothing shop out of pettiness and jealousy, insecurity on her own part. She abused the power that she had, the family that she came from. Okay, so when she says that girls like Eva aren't just cheap labour, they're people, it's hints that she's already starting to change, so her change is underway. She becomes the most perceptive character, realising that Gerald knows the girl, now called Daisy Renton, and that the inspector appears to already be in possession of all the information already. So there is therefore little point in resisting his line of questioning. She attempts to forewarn her mother in particular, who in turn simply dismisses such claims. So whilst Mr. and Mrs. Berlin look down on Sheila and treat her like a child, in fact, the reality is that she's the most perceptive, she's the most mature, and she's the one that's clued into what the inspector's up to. Okay, so some quotations to support this continued evolution. She, first of all, acknowledging her role with Eva Smith. She said, I'd persuade mother to close our account with them. So I'm really responsible. I'll never do it again to anybody. Okay, oh, should have gone back. She's aligned herself with the inspector and is now at odds with her parents. From a childish yes daddy to challenging his attitude towards his workers, simply because she feels remorse and terrible for what she's done. She has a conscience. She accepts responsibility. And if you're talking about Sheila, you must also link her to that theme of social responsibility and caring for others. Remember, Priestley, as a socialist, believed that we were all responsible for each other. To ensure a fairer and happier society, it requires us to care for each other and not just to look after our own interests. Okay, and the final part of her evolution is, well, what's she like after the inspector's departure? Well, she's angry at her parents' refusal to accept their role in the death of Eva Smith, and she's shocked at how quickly they start joking about how they've been had. Remember, Gerald works out that the inspector may not have been real. He also suggests that the inspector had a photograph of different girls. It wasn't the same person. And once Mr. Berlin thinks he's escaped and there's not going to be a public scandal and his knighthood isn't going to be under threat, he's very quick to joke about things. And this shocks Sheila, and it shocks Eric as well in his defence, because ultimately they still did what they did. They all admitted their role, the way they behaved, but yet the older generation, and Gerald, it has to be said, they don't. Once they think they get away with it, they have no conscience, no guilt, no remorse. But Sheila and Eric certainly do. Ultimately, she's the most changed character. She demonstrates compassion for the lives of the workers, is much more aware of her social responsibility, and is able to judge both her parents and Gerald from a far more informed and wise position. And some quotations to support this, to reinforce this. If I could help her now, I would. You're just beginning to pretend all over again. She's attacking her parents. This reflects her guilt and her responsibility. to reflect her awareness and perception of the inspector's role. Well, he inspected us all right. You know, that's an awareness that she didn't possess at the beginning. Why, you fool? He knows. Of course he knows. And I hate to think how much he knows that we don't know yet. You'll see. You'll see. Again, her perception, her awareness of the inspector, and her acceptance of responsibility. She's far more perceptive, and her response to the inspector is far more mature than her parents' response. Remember, her mother denies, tries to lie to the inspector, dismissing her own role in Eva Smith, insisting that the way she behaved there was absolutely nothing wrong with. And one of my favourite lines in reference to her mother really is, he's giving us the rope so that we'll hang ourselves. And this reflects a level of intelligence missing from her parents. Remember, the inspector cleverly walks Mrs. Burling into laying the blame for Eva Smith's death firmly at the hands of the father of the unborn child. Dramatic irony at play there. We all know, or we work out at this point, and Sheila has worked it out, that father is actually Eric, Mrs. Burling's son, and she's saying that he should be publicly humiliated and shamed. And Sheila tries to warn her, but Mrs. Burling refuses that warning. So her transformation is complete, from naive, self-satisfied, unaware little girl to a strong-minded, compassionate and determined young woman who knows her own mind and what is right. She offers hope for the future. Priestley uses Sheila as a symbol for change, that it's not too late to change our ways to ensure a fairer society for all. Sheila has learned a great deal through the course of the play, and the audience are expected to identify more with her than with Mr. Burling, because Priestley wants them to change and accept that maybe the way they've been behaving or their attitudes are not helpful to the wider society, and to stop seeing workers as merely a means to their own wealth. Maybe understanding that actually they are reliant upon the working classes for their wealth. Okay, final slide, exam relevance. So when there are, you get two options in the AQA exam, certainly. One character question, one theme question. If the character question is on Sheila, well, obviously, we focus on everything we've just talked about. We can talk about how she connects with other characters, in particular the inspector and Gerald, but also how she talks to her parents, how she is shocked by their antics and their attitudes. But if you get a theme question, well, you can also link her to the theme question. So, for example, if you've got a question on class, on social responsibility, on gender, on generation, then Sheila's fair game. She's an integral character, an important character to use in discussing or exploring any of these themes, and obviously then her links to the inspector. Right, okay, that's the Sheila one done. Hope you found it useful. Check in for more videos upcoming. All right, cheers guys.